Good day, everyone. Welcome to Real Conservative News. I'm your host, Nathaniel Rajkumar. Starting off locally here in Trinidad and Tobago, the ambassador-designate of the state of Palestine. That's funny by itself because there's no actual state of Palestine. But nevertheless, I will get to my commentary later on. Let me read the reports. So the ambassador-designate of the state of Palestine to Trinidad and Tobago, Dr. Linda Sobe Ali, has issued a public appeal to Prime Minister Kamala Persaud and the government of Trinidad and Tobago to maintain their stance on international humanitarian law and continue advocating for the protection of Palestinian children. We want the children of Palestine to be, the Palestinian people, in that territory to be protected from Hamas. That's what they need protection from. Hamas, an evil indoctrination in the schools in Gaza and schools in Judea and Samaria, which is under the control of the Palestinian Authority. That's what we need. We need protection for the children from these radicals in the Palestinian Authority and in Hamas. That's what we need. Speaking during a virtual press conference, Envoy Sobe Ali urged the administration to resist normalizing Israel's military actions in Gaza and the wider occupied Palestinian territories. So, of course, they're talking about the so-called West Bank. And that's why I said there's no real Palestinian state. They had chances in the past, numerous chances in the past, to have a two-state solution. That is not biblical, though. All that land belongs to the Jews. But at the end of the day, the Jews wanted to compromise because they wanted their own state. And since even before 1948, they agreed to a two-state solution, and each time the Arabs rejected it. Why? Because the Arabs don't ever want to live next to a Jewish state. The diplomat statements followed recent discussions with Trinidad and Tobago regarding the country's diplomatic outreach in the Middle East. Dr. Sobe Ali raised questions concerning recent engagements between local officials and Israeli representatives, urging citizens and policymakers to carefully examine the motives behind regional diplomatic initiatives. The government is having, listen people, if the government is doing good, I will commend them. When the government is doing utter nonsense, I will criticize them as usual. Having a closer relationship with countries like America and Israel is good for us. Even from a spiritual perspective, a biblical perspective, our nation can be greatly blessed the closer we become with Israel. While emphasizing that she had no intention of interfering in the sovereign foreign policy decisions of Trinidad and Tobago, she expressed concern over Israel's expanding presence across the Caribbean region. In other words, you're trying to get into people's business, so don't try to deny it. But that's how these individuals from that territory are. The hypocrites and bullies as well. Addressing Prime Minister Persaud directly, Dr. Sobe Ali framed her appeal on shared human and diplomatic values, asking the Prime Minister to support a negotiated two-state solution and advocate for international justice. You see the hypocrisy with these people? Hypocrisy. Two-state solution that your own leaders continue to reject. Hypocrisy to the maximum. But you know, CNC3 and all these tribal people in Trinidad and Tobago and the jihadist supporters fall for this over and over again, and they will not go back and actually Google. You can simply Google and you will see how many times the Palestinian Authority and the Arabs and the Palestinians, so-called Palestinians, have rejected a two-state solution. How many times? Now that Israel is saying, we can't afford to make a two-state solution anymore with these people who tried to destroy us on October 7th, 2023. We can't afford to trust them with a state. And rightfully so, because they actually indoctrinate their children with hatred towards the Israeli nation and people. You really expect Israel to continue to agree to a two-state solution now? You're being a hypocrite. That's what you're being. The ambassador-designate noted that she had previously met with key cabinet members, including Foreign and CARICOM Affairs Minister Sean Sobers, President Christine Kangaloo, and regional leaders at the CARICOM Heads of Government Conference to discuss bilateral relations and regional peace. In response to concerns surrounding recent diplomatic meetings, Foreign and CARICOM Affairs Minister Sean Sobers clarified the government's position, reiterating Trinidad and Tobago's long-standing foreign policy. Ministry officials emphasized that maintaining open lines of communication with Israeli diplomats remain consistent with the nation's balanced approach, which supports a peaceful two-state framework while preserving bilateral relations with both Israeli and Palestinian authorities. Examining the history of the Palestinian conflict reveals key milestones regarding stated declarations and territorial proposals. And of course, this is not a statement made by the government of Trinidad and Tobago. This new part here is information that I obtained online. The formal proclamation of and this is facts. Anyone can Google it and get it for themselves. The formal proclamation of the State of Palestine occurred on November 15, 1988. First time anyone really actually talked about a Palestinian state. When Palestinian Liberation Organization Chairman Yasser Arafat declared independence in Algiers. Earlier on May 28, 1964, the PLO formally adopted its official flag, which was derived from the banner used during the 1916 Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire. These events took place long after international efforts had sought to partition the land between the Jewish and Arab populations. I wonder if all these radicals here in Trinidad and Tobago know that the British, who conquered the Ottoman Empire and took ownership of that land, was going to give all of that territory to the Jews. But because of the pressure from the Arabs, they decided to split the land. And that was a huge mistake. You do not split land that was given by God to the Jews to anyone. And worse yet, to people that don't like the Israeli people, because you're going to cause conflict, right? And that is what we have been having for decades now. The British caused this nonsense, and the British caused this nonsense. Trying to make peace here ended up causing more war. Throughout the 20th and 21st centuries, Arab and Palestinian leadership consistently rejected proposals, people, just as I said a little while ago, proposals to partition the region into two independent states. Notable rejections include the 1937 Peel Commission proposal, the 1947, that is 1 year before Israel declared their independence, the 1947 UN Partition Plan Resolution 181, and the 1967 Khartoum Resolution with its declaration of no peace, no recognition, no negotiations. Later peace initiatives including the 2000 Camp David Summit under Ehud Barak, the 2008 offer by Ahmad Olmert, and the 2020 U.S. proposal was similarly rejected. Do you hear that word? Rejected or met with refusal to negotiate by Palestinian leadership. So this so-called ambassador, why doesn't she tell you all here in Trinidad and Tobago the truth? That is her people that continue to reject a Palestinian state over and over and over again. And then after October 7th, 2023, when Hamas and civilians went into Israeli territory and murdered over 1,000 people, they expect now Israel to agree to any kind of state. The territorial framework of the region was significantly altered. This is more historical facts, people. Earlier, during the British Mandate period following the 1917 Balfour Declaration, in March 1921, at Cairo Conference, British Colonial Secretary Winston Churchill officially severed approximately, listen to it, 77% of the original Palestine mandate east of the Jordan River to establish Transjordan for the Hashemite allies. So the Arabs got most of the land already. Most of the land. That is the nonsense the British did. Gave the Arabs 77%. All the so-called Palestinians in Gaza may say, and in the West Bank, which is Judea and Samaria. They could have gone to Transjordan and had enjoyed their life there. Gone to Jordan, but no, they did not want to give up any land at all. They wanted to own Israel's little remaining portion as well. This partition later codified under Article 25 of the Mandate and ratified by the League of Nations in September 1922, restricted the designated area for the Jewish national home to the territory west of the Jordan River. Britain had made commitments under the Balfour Declaration to foster a Jewish national home, but to appease Hashemite leaders and secure their own geopolitical interests after World War I, they severed over 3/4 of the original mandate territory. These are historical facts that Trinidadians and those that follow the Islamic religion refuse to go and learn. They prefer to listen to lies, blatant lies. That land, which was conquered by the British and therefore belonged to the British, was supposed to go back to the Jews. But for their own personal agendas and their own personal desires, the British betrayed the Jews and gave most of the land to the Arabs. And now the Arabs still want more of what little remained for Israel. That single decision fundamentally altered the demographic and geographic map before a Jewish state could even be established. Bear in mind, people, of course, there was a certain amount of the territory that Israel took back after certain wars, and that is that is understood when you conquer a certain area that was already promised to you anyhow you take it. When you conquer it, it now becomes yours. My response, in time to come, Jesus will judge all nations based on how their governments treated Israel. So I hope and pray that our leaders, including Kamala, will be wise enough. She's not making much wise decisions these days anyhow you take it, but I hope she will use wisdom in this case. Be wise enough to ignore all the negative anti-Zionist warnings which have been made by supporters of the fake Palestinian state. Palestine was never a country, people, nation, or kingdom at any time in history. It was a territory, but not a nation or a kingdom in any time in history. No part in the Bible mentions a Palestinian people or Palestinian state. The Roman Emperor Hadrian, this is historical, people, historical facts that you can Google for yourself and verify my claims. The Roman Emperor Hadrian renamed the territories of Judea and Samaria, Palestine, in 135 or 136 AD as a form of punishment for a Jewish revolt. Not a Palestinian revolt, people. A Jewish revolt. A revolt, why? Because the Romans were occupying Jewish territory. And so they revolted. It was a failed revolt. It was that time God wasn't ready to bring them back to the land anyhow you take it. Or give them back ownership of the land. That came in 1948. Everything in due time. Right? The promise that was given in Amos 9:11-15. That took time, right? But at the end of the day, it was a Jewish revolt, not a Palestinian. Due to diplomatic pressure from Arab nations, the British foolishly decided to divide God's land between the Jews and Arab settlers in the earlier part of the 1900s, as I just stated. But the radical jihadists rejected all proposals before and after 1948, when Israel became a nation again. Now, of course, they lie and say that they want the land to go back to the original borders. But you all rejected it even when that original agreement was made. So you all are hypocrites. Hypocrites, people. To all you so-called Christians who have been deceived by replacement theology, you need to read Romans 11, which says that in the end, all Israel will be saved and that God never rejected his people and that he only placed a temporary spiritual blindness on them due to their lack of faith, but that it is not full, and that as Christians, we are supposed to provoke them unto salvation, make them jealous so that they will want to accept Jesus Christ as Lord and Savior and their Messiah. We are not supposed to be condemning them and rejecting them. Read Romans 11. Ezekiel 38 speaks about the coming war in the future, where all these Arab states, not all, some will actually protest, but Arab states, not Arab, but states like Iran, because they are Persian. So states like Iran, and then there's Turkey, and Russia. Russia is not Arab either. Russia and others will come together, will unite to wage war against Israel. And God says that I'm against you, King of Rush, Prince of Rush. In other words, the leader of Russia said, I'm against you. Because, of course, I know your evil plans against my people. He said that I will put a hook in your jaw. In other words, God will actually encourage them to come. He's going to set a trap for them, and he's going to lure them towards Israel. And, of course, when they attempt to invade Israel, God is going to utterly destroy them, utterly crush them and defeat them. Supernaturally, America is not going to help Israel. Israel will not be capable of defeating this enemy this time around. God is going to supernaturally intervene on behalf of his people. So, and then, of course, read Amos 9:11 to 15, which speaks about God's promise of bringing back the people to their land. Never, ever, ever to remove them again. So all you anti-Semites and anti-Zionists outside there, you all can rant and rave how much you want. The God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob has no plans of ever removing his people from their territory, from his territory again. I'm going to say God never rejected his people and also promised to never remove them from their land again after bringing them back in 1948. In the end, all of Israel will be saved and God will defeat all their enemies. Rest assured about that.
Weather report for Friday, August 7, 2026, Trinidad and Tobago. The weather forecast for Friday, August 7, 2026 in Trinidad and Tobago predicts a high temperature of 28 degrees Celsius and a low of 25 degrees Celsius, with thunderstorms developing during the day. The official Trinidad and Tobago Meteorological Service indicates a hot, sunny and hazy day overall, but with a 50% chance of rain and localized afternoon thundery showers. Humidity stays high at 77% throughout the day. Wind will be blowing from the northeast at 12 miles per hour, but it can gust up to 40 kilometers per hour near heavy downpours. The UV index reaches an extreme level of 10 during midday sun exposure, requiring high protection. A mild to moderate concentration of Saharan dust remains in the atmosphere, so sensitive individuals should take precautions. Sea states are moderate, with open water waves hitting 1.5 meters to 2.0 meters.
Regional news now. The government of St. Vincent and the Grenadines is moving ahead with plans to resume rehabilitation works at the historic Fort Charlotte under the World Bank-funded Unleashing the Blue Economy of the Caribbean project. I wonder if they will rename it something else instead of Fort Charlotte. You know how Trinidad going completely woke and just trying to get rid of all our historical names which were under in our colonial era. I wonder if they will do that there too. This is all about trying to promote tourism, you know, people. And of course, your own heritage and history and so forth. The younger generations to see and to learn about the historical past, about their past, right? Even their colonial past. Residents and stakeholders gathered at the Catholic Pastoral Center on Wednesday, July 29 for a community consultation aimed at providing updates on the project and receiving feedback ahead of the restart of construction. The rehabilitation project is expected to preserve one of the country's most significant historical landmarks. And people, you know what that means? It's colonial historical landmarks, historical colonial landmarks, while enhancing Fort Charlotte as a heritage tourism attraction, boosting tourism. But preserving the original names, people, will also boost tourism, because when people Google it and they see the original names, they'll say, wow, yes, but I really want to go and see there. But when you want to rename everything under the sun, like here in Trinidad and Tobago, and then you want to boost tourism, all because you're obsessed with our colonial past and despise it, ridiculous, but counterproductive. I hope St. Vincent and the Grenadines doesn't end up going down that same woke, destructive road.
for example, I will give you a little example. We might say that we are going to reface the fort in itself. Obviously, that can't happen because we have our national trust, but we can't do things like that without stakeholders seeing. One day they wake up and they'll be like, what happened to our beautiful fort that was there? They have to be in the conversation from the setting. Other important thing is the grievance redress mechanism. This is basically, you see we have a suggestion box there. That should actually be a suggestion and complaint box. So anything that you see that is not described within this particular consultation and the series of consultations that we are going to have. We have these suggestion boxes in which you can make a complaint and say, these guys are trucking, they are disturbing the community, they are whatever the case may be. And you can put your suggestion there, or you can then, we have phone numbers and so on that you can call us directly, in which we then have to then come and investigate and so on. So this is a very important mechanism for the project in itself. It's not only for complaints, as I mentioned, it's also your suggestions. You might have some ideas that we can incorporate or we can take into consideration for the project.
International news now. In a notable shift from his public balancing act, President Donald Trump has privately signaled to donors that Vice President J.D. Vance should carry the MAGA movement forward in 2028. Reportedly telling political contributors in an Oval Office meeting, at the end of the day, we need to elect J.D. Vance. Anti-Zionist J.D. Vance, who is accusing Israel of sabotaging Trump's precious deals in the Middle East. That's the man Trump is endorsing. While the comment offers his clearest indication yet of a preferred successor, White House advisors caution that the decision is far from final. Trump continues to praise Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who will make a much better president in my opinion. He's a bit naive when it pertains to things in the Middle East, but he's much better than anti-Zionist Vance, floating a joint ticket between the two men. I don't want that anti-Zionist with Marco Rubio either. I want someone that can be with you to kind of repair the image of the Republican Party. And frequent polls aids about their preferences. Let me read over that part. So Trump continues to praise Secretary of State Marco Rubio, floating a joint ticket between the two men, and frequently polls aids about their preferences. Leading allies to emphasize that the president is known to change his mind a whole lot and is unlikely to issue a formal public endorsement anytime soon to protect his own second-term political image. You don't really have much of an image to protect anymore, Trump. Everyone has seen all your videos of saying that you were not going to negotiate make any kind of ridiculous deals with Iran, and that it was unconditional surrender that you were looking for. And now, time after time, because of Witkoff and all these kind of individuals, and most likely J.D. Vance, you've changed your whole tune and now making all kind of ridiculous deals with radical jihadist terrorists who want to utterly destroy Israel and utterly destroy America. And they will never, ever, ever change their minds about that because it's part of their religious belief. They believe they must destroy the infidels in the world in order to usher in the coming of their Messiah. No deal that you make with them is going to change their hearts and their minds, Trump. You have to crush these people by force. You have to chase them out of office by force. You have to defeat them. You have to conquer them. That's the only way.
Psalm 31, 1-4. In you, Lord, I have taken refuge. Let me never be put to shame. Deliver me in your righteousness. Turn your ear to me, come quickly to my rescue, be my rock of refuge, a strong fortress to save me. Since you are my rock and my fortress, for the sake of your name lead and guide me. Keep me free from the trap that is set for me, for you are my refuge.
Lord, I take refuge in you. Be my strong fortress and save me. For your name's sake, lead me and rescue me from every trap.
Into your hands I commit my spirit, Lord. I trust in you. You saw my anguish and set my feet in a spacious place.
Folks, that brings us to the end of today's news report. Thanks again to everyone who continues to support my content. Please like, comment, share, and subscribe. Stay blessed and stay safe most of all. In Jesus' name.